To climates unknown did courageously steer. Through oceans to deserts for freedom they came, and dying bequeathed us their freedom and fame. In freedom we're born, and in freedom we live. Our purses are ready.
Welcome, everybody. My name is Doug Ulwick, and this is the first meeting back in public as a group for the Historical Society of Old Abington, and I think full 2 years that we've been away. So you're part of the beginning of something, and I like that. Maybe the end of something too, but certainly the beginning of meeting back in person again. The presentation we have, the conversation we have today, is something we booked back in September, and having no idea what the winter would bring, and that we wouldn't be meeting in person throughout the whole course of the winter, but that's the way it went. So, but we're excited to be back. We're excited to be doing this program. We're excited you're all here. This is a great turnout. When you put the wheels in motion again, you never know who's going to show up or how many. So we're very gratified at the turnout that you're here. And let's see, what else? I'm passing around clipboards. And it grew out of contract tracing. Whenever we did have anything here, we took down names and email addresses of who's here. And I'd like to keep it going because frankly, we, not just for contact tracing, but also we'd like to stay in touch with you folks by email. We promise we won't flood your email boxes, but if you have an email address to share, we'll at least be able to keep you up to date with the programs. We have programs once a month for 3 months in the fall and 3 months in the spring. So a total of 6 per year. And I've really gotten ahead of myself already because we always start our programs with a salute to the flag. So let me not forget that and ask those who are able to please stand and join me in a salute to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. You may be seated. And if I forgot to mention it, my name is Doug Ulwick. I'm the current president of the Historical Society of Old Abington. At least I think I am, because we haven't had an election in a while because of COVID. So I'm just kind of taking the title and whatever. Someone can kick me out if they want to. But anyhow, so we are always active in looking for new members. We've lost some members during COVID. I'm familiar with a couple of them. I read in the paper that Joe Waisgerber had passed, I think. And who else? Help me out. Who else have we lost? I've been paying more attention than you guys have. I love it. But anyway, it's a bad way to lose our membership, but we're always looking for new members as well. And so feel free to join us. Membership is $12 a year, I think $75 for a life membership. It's not a terribly huge investment, but it's really our only source of income to pay our speakers' fees and everything else. So we appreciate participation in that. Anyway, what else do we have to cover? Oh, we have one more meeting this season, and it will be the first Sunday in May, and that one is going to be about Civil War reenactment encampments. And it's a particularly timely topic for us this year because on Abington's Flag Day, Founders Day weekend, which is June 10th, 11th, and 12th this year, and we're celebrating Abington's 310th anniversary, we are going to have, as we have in past years, a Civil War encampment at Island Grove. They've chosen to make this a regional event, so it's expected to be very large. And they'll have mock battles both Saturday and Sunday, I think 1 o'clock in the afternoon, I've been hearing. And we'll be putting out more literature on that. The Dyer will be mounting an exhibit in the Sam Dyer room on our Civil War artifacts and publications and such. The Dyer and the Historical Society have a huge Civil War collection. It's just one of the biggest around. We have copies of the Liberator newspaper, hard copies of the Liberator newspaper, not just on microfilm or microfiche. And those are just one of our treasured collections here. So we like to show that off. And I think we're actually going to manage to have a contingent of the encampment people actually march up to the Dyer here to be part of the exhibit and take a look at what we have to show in our collections here. So we're excited about that too. Anyway, today's program is about the DAR. I found I didn't know much about it. I still don't know much about it, but we're going to learn much about it. And we're very fortunate today to have Kathy Hughes from here in Abington and Jill Higgins, who are going to do a presentation. In the old days, we used to just have people come up here and talk on for 40 minutes about whatever it is they're going to talk about. A few years ago, I changed it up and made it into a conversation. And so I'm going to invite them up and ask them questions that I would like to know, probably more about their personal experiences, something that probably isn't in their presentation, and then give the floor to them to let them do their prepared presentation and come back at the end with questions, and you folks are more than welcome to chime in with questions as well. But let's invite them forward now. Kathy, Jill, come on up and take some seats here if you'd like. Take the other side of the screen, and I'll stay here, and I'll disappear at some point.
Whatever you would like.
Now? Anyway, I don't know a lot about the DAR, but you obviously are both very involved in it. Requirements for membership. I mean, do you have to come from a lineage of people who can trace their roots back to the American Revolution? Is that like first and foremost?
So first and foremost is any woman over the age of 18 or over who can trace their lineage back to a patriot who either served in the Revolution or somebody who aided the Americans during the Revolution. So if your ancestor paid taxes during the Revolution and you can find their name on the tax rolls, that would also qualify as service.
Okay, that's great. Okay, so what's your personal connection, Jill? We'll start with you since you're chatting with us already.
Sure. So I joined a little over 3 years ago. Back in high school, my mother actually knew that she could join through an aunt, and I'm adopted. Okay. So I didn't have my family history. So I said to her, you can't join an organization that won't take me as a member. Like,
good for you.
It's just not going to happen. So years passed, I searched, I found my biological family, and we were actually able to trace it, my birth father's side, back to a patriot.
Wow.
So through a lot of work, working with the National DAR headquarters to get the right paperwork in order, I was finally able to prove my lineage and join. So both my mother and I joined the same year.
Nice. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Now, Kathy Griffin Hughes, see, I even knew her maiden name because we've known each other like for a long time. You're originally from Vermont.
Right.
Did your membership start there or down here?
No, it started down here. It could have started up there.
Okay.
My aunt was a member, and back in the 60s, I knew that I could be a member through her. Mm-hmm. But I didn't want to be a member because of DAR's racist history.
Ah, that's something I think you're going to get into, aren't you?
No,
or
probably
no?
won't.
Not so much
okay.
this,
today, but no.
Well, then tell us a little if it's not in the presentation.
Well, it's probably common history anyways that Marian Anderson was refused
I remember that, yes.
A concert in DAR's Constitution Hall. The thing was, Washington, D.C. was totally segregated at the time. And why the DAR was singled out was because Eleanor Roosevelt, who had been a member of the DAR, publicly declined membership because of it. Right. And so, but...
and Marian gave that concert on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial, as I recall.
She did. But after that, the DAR changed their bylaws to accept people of color. And so she was able to have concerts in the Constitution Hall after that. She, in fact, held several concerts after that.
So we credit Eleanor for that. At least in part.
For making a stand.
Yeah, making a stand, yeah.
I mean, when the wife of the president says, no, people pay attention.
So, that was the reason I didn't want to join. And then, while I was doing research here, in talking to Merlin Liberty,
that's our librarian here at the Dyer.
Yeah, she was asking me why I didn't join the DAR. And I told her, and she says, well, things have changed. And she says, they're a big service organization. and whatnot, and they accept women of any race, religion, creed, ethnic origin. And so I said, I guess I'll look into it.
Totally knocked down your defenses, huh?
Yep.
Gone.
Yep.
Gone.
Yep.
Okay.
So
All those roadblocks just gone.
Yep. So I contacted through the DAR website, dar.org, the local chapter here, Deborah Sampson Chapter, and worked with the registrar and got accepted through using my aunt's application.
Ah, okay. There was a connection. We've done programs in the past about the Mayflower descendants as well, and their network is just amazing. I mean, they're all over the country and all, again, races and creeds and whatever, but you have to prove the lineage directly to, it's not tax rolls or anything else. You got to show the bloodline.
Yeah, you have to with the DAR too.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
You have to provide, I'm the registrar for our chapter.
Oh, okay.
And so I help women with their applications. And you have to provide documentation to support everything that you cite on your application.
Okay.
All the dates for births and deaths and marriages.
So the Dyer must be a good resource for people
It is.
hoping to do that, because that's kind of the name of the game around here to a great degree now. They're actually doing some rebranding, Dyer Memorial Library and Archives, which I think speaks to a lot about what goes on around here. I don't know if that's been officially adopted, but I've been seeing it in print a bit lately. So, and the head of the Board of Trustees is back there, and she just nodded her head. So I think it's official. Anyway, well, I'm going to step aside and let you folks do a presentation that you prepared. And I'll bop back in at the end with any questions I may have. And depending upon how brave the audience is, sometimes if it's appropriate and you want to jump in during the presentation with a question about something you're seeing right then and there, we don't discourage that. Just be respectful of our presenters. But if you find there's a lull and there's a question that you're going to forget in 5 minutes, then I think the ladies will be accommodating. Anyway, okay?
Okay.
Again, thank you both for being here, and I'll check back in a bit.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
I need some water. My mouth is dry already.
Can you just get the lights, Doug?
Sure.
Back there, so people can see the screen.
There we
Thank
go.
you. So thanks everyone for joining us today. Doug just kind of took us through the beginning of what DAR is. So now we want to treat you guys to the history of the Deborah Sampson Chapter, which is the chapter that serves the Brockton area. So Brockton, the Bridgewaters, Avon, Stoughton, Sharon, Braintree, Quincy, kind of a lot of the towns around here. And then we are celebrating our 125th anniversary this year. So an overview of the 125 years of our chapter.
So in 1890, the Daughters of the American Revolution was formed. And 7 years later, 18 women gathered in the parlor of the Hotel Belmont in Brockton and organized the Deborah Sampson Chapter. Funny story on the willow tree.
That's not the actual willow tree.
That's not, no, I don't think it's there anymore, actually. Deborah Sampson supposedly took a willow tree from her home in Plimpton. And after she and Benjamin were married and living in Sharon, she planted it in the front yard, outside the front windows where she could see it. Well, her husband Benjamin didn't like it so close to the house. So one day when Deborah Sampson was away, he went out and he dug up the tree, filled the hole with rocks, and then replanted the tree and put soil around it. Well, when she came home, she saw the soil had been disturbed, and he says, well, I just wanted to loosen the soil up to help it grow. Well, after a while, when he was away, she went out. She saw it wasn't growing very well. She went out, she dug the tree up, discovered the rocks, took out the rocks, took them far away, and then replanted the tree with fresh soil. Didn't say anything to Benjamin about it. Well, about a year later, Benjamin said, this tree is really growing well. And then the whole truth came out, and she told him what she had done.
making trouble all her life. And for those of you who don't know, I think we probably should give a little background on Deborah Sampson. Deborah Sampson was a woman who dressed as a man to fight in the Revolution. And it was discovered when she was wounded, and one of the doctors actually discovered that she was a woman, and she was sent home. But she was a brave lady. Since 1897, our members have actually gone to her grave and honored her with a wreath laying every year. And this year we are actually going to do a rededication of the marker that is at her grave in May as part of that ceremony. And in 1898, we actually started honoring local schoolgirls with essay contests. So they could enter these contests and receive an award. And this is something that we actually still do today between our Good Citizen essay contests, American History essay contests, and Patriots of the American Revolution contests.
And we actually have a lady in our attendance today that was awarded a Good Citizen Award back in 1955.
Yes, so something we're still doing today.
She's still a good citizen.
Yeah. Okay, we've always celebrated our anniversaries, and in the beginning it was held in where we were organized in the Hotel Belmont, but then as the chapter grew, it became too large to have in a small place, so we started having our celebrations in the First Congregational Church in Brockton.
Perfect. So 1900 to 1909, this was definitely a decade when our chapter grew. We were the largest chapter in Massachusetts. At the end of our 6th year, we had 285 members, and we were up to 372 members by our 7th year. We also had 10 real daughters. And what a real daughter is it means that her father served in the Revolution. So that was a large number of real daughters for one chapter to have.
Our chapter has placed memorial plaques at various places in the area throughout the years. And these two, that one over there is in the Brockton City Hall in the Rotunda. And this one here, you've probably seen it on Route 58 in Plimpton. It's across from the Congregational Church in Plimpton.
So we just talked a little bit about real daughters, and these are a few of ours. Deborah Sampson Chapter actually set out to find as many real daughters as we could, and we had the distinction of being the chapter with the most real daughters. And Salome Sellers, who's in the bottom right picture there, she was the oldest real daughter brought into the DAR at 107 years old. And then Mary Ann Scott, who was the third lady right there in that picture, was the youngest real daughter brought into the DAR. And Mary Ann Scott was actually part of a family. There were 3 sisters, and all of them became members of the Deborah Sampson Chapter. And it was the first and only group of 3 sister real daughters to become members. And it's believed that their father, Thomas Clapp, was 16 during the Revolution, and then in his 80s when his youngest daughter was born. So, very busy man. The 1910s to 1919, we kept, World War I was starting on the horizon. The chapter was definitely involved in activities relating to supporting the service. We partnered with other women's organizations for social improvement, like improvements on the local trolley lines. And then Mrs. Tom Thumb, Countess Magri, was actually made an honorary member of our chapter. She lived in Middleborough. So there was a lot of honoring of Mrs. Tom Thumb, and it was in 1906 when she was given that honor of being an honorary member.
Another plaque that we placed, it's currently on the wall next to the entrance to the Mount Moriah Baptist Church in Brockton. But originally it was placed on a boulder that came from Colonel Simeon Carey's farm on the training green where Colonel Carey had trained the militia. This is a bookcase in the Brockton Public Library that we donated. and it's dedicated to the memory of our first organizing regent, Mrs. Lucy Spur.
So 1914 is when members first took an interest in what was going on in Europe with World War I, and they actually bowed their heads in silent protest during a meeting over the conditions of the war in Europe. June 1915, this was kind of cool. The members participated in a naturalization ceremony for the first time. It was the second of its ceremony of its type held in Brockton. And there were 189 new Americans that were welcomed into the country during that ceremony. And then 1918, 1919, this is when we really started working towards what could we do to help the war efforts for World War I. And we did a lot of knitting, crocheting, sewing, making kits to send overseas. But what I wanted to share were two quotes that I found in our archives about what these women did during this period. The first one is from 1918. These are directly from our secretary books. And it says, "Conservation has been the keynote. We have faithfully and conscientiously been very sparing in our use of sugar, coal, and wheat. We have more than ever before mended gloves and hose, worn without a murmur last year's millinery. In fact, have conserved everything but our financial resources, our strengths, our energies. Of those, we have been most generous and lavish, believing firmly that the worthiest tribute we can pay the brave men and women whom we so delight to honor is working for the living. Much effort this year has been directed towards the thousands of refugees who have been driven from their homes and their devastated villages. All sorts of garments have been made by loving hands, accentuated by sympathetic hearts, and sent across the sea. Warm socks, mufflers, and helmets, sweaters and niceties for the brave boys who are fighting so practically and well to inspire our liberty are the work of nimble fingers. Comfort kits and torch candles, jellies and treat boxes have been a slight expression of one realization of the debt of appreciation and gratitude." Then the following year in 1919, it says, "As a chapter, our interest and sympathies have gone out in larger degrees to the refugees and nurses, and especially to the homeless orphans of brave, bleeding, pillaged Belgium. Scores, yes, hundreds of garments have been made by loving fingers and sent across through the agency of Belgian Relief. Sweaters and helmets and more have been furnished to soldiers and sailors of our own country, who have taken so prominent a part in winning the world's greatest war. We have erected no monuments, we have dedicated no tablets, knowing well that the greatest tribute to the heroes of the past is service for the living. Many chapter members have made the supreme sacrifice, giving of their dearest to our country, sending them away with a smile, hiding grieving lips." And I just think both of those quotes really show how these women were working to support their country in any way they could find, even when they were sending their own sons over there. 1920s, we continued working in the community, honoring our good citizens, donations to local organizations, and Flag Day celebrations. The chapter loved a good Flag Day celebration. We didn't let one go by without a party. In 1921, Rebekah Boomer, who was a real granddaughter, which means her grandfather fought in the Revolution, she was one of our chapter founders. She passed away, and she was very instrumental in getting the chapter up and running, but never served as our regent, which is like our president, because she had a speech impediment, and she felt that she didn't want to take on that role. But we did honor her with the title of honorary regent, having never served. Another very prominent member is Sylvia Donaldson. She was the first woman elected to the state legislature and served for 8 consecutive years. That was in 1922. In 1926, she was actually given the honor of serving as Speaker of the House for one meeting. And according to a newspaper account, she was standing erect and alert on the floor of the Senate House. She faced an audience of 250 members, many of them hostile. For that session, the bill on compulsory jury service for women was before the House. And before she became a well-respected member of the legislature, she was actually a teacher in the Brockton school systems and had received a lot of awards and recognition for her work with students. And then this was her second career. And also from the 20s, members were asked to donate $1 towards a chair in Constitution Hall as they were remodeling that. And as we asked members for that $1, the pledge was $150 for a chair. As they earned their $1, we asked them to tell the chapter how they earned that $1, so that these women could feel proud of the work that they did towards the money for this chair. And they, within a year, had raised that $150, had the chair installed, and it had a plaque on it that it was given by the Deborah Sampson Chapter in memory of Deborah Sampson, who enlisted in the Continental Army as Robert Shirtliff. Grave markings, we like to do those. We like to mark the graves of the actual Revolutionary War patriots and of daughters. So in May of 1929, we were going to mark the grave of Aurelia McDonald. She was the oldest of the Clapp sisters. But the day didn't go quite as planned. It was a beautiful day. Everybody's at the cemetery. They're getting ready to put the marker on. They open it up from the packaging. And as our historian record said, the bronze marker was released from its wrappings, and much to our surprise, found that to be of a Sons of the American Revolution. The mistake was rectified, and the correct marker was placed on the monument in June. So things don't always go to plan.
She's buried here in Mount Vernon Cemetery, and the plaque is missing, so we assume that it was stolen.
She's having a very hard time getting a plaque.
We're going to try to replace it at some point.
Yes, and we're going to be cleaning her grave
Yes.
this fall. Actually, we'll be cleaning the graves of all three Clapp sisters this fall.
Right. For many years, we looked for a permanent home, and so in the 30s, the War Memorial Building, which is still there in Brockton, was our home. We do not have a permanent home now. We have our meetings in various places in the area. We've been in the community room at the Abington Public Police Department, and we've met in the Abington Public Library. We've met at the Quonset House in Easton.
We've met here.
Yeah, we met here. We've met in various places. So
we're wandering nomads.
Yeah. Okay, another marker. This is in the D.W. Field Park. This honors George Washington. And it's in the park, as you're going towards Westgate Mall, it's in the part of the D.W. Field Park that's on your left. And as you go in that road, you'll see it. It's on the left-hand side. It marked we planted a linden tree there. The linden tree is not there anymore.
No, and that's an actual picture of the planting of the tree, which I thought that was kind of cool to find. Okay, so not question and answer time, but quiz time. Does anyone know what that float is supposed to represent without reading the text up there? Because if you guys can figure it out, you deserve a prize. So in 1931, the town of Brockton celebrated their 50th anniversary, and we participated in their parade with this beautiful float. And the description we have is, Deborah Sampson Chapter had a beautiful float, which was decorated with white and festooned with 500 American Beauty roses made of crepe paper. The tableau represented Betsy Ross making her 13-star flag. If anyone can figure that out, please let us know, because I think it looks like a shoe. I think it's the old ladies who lived in a shoe. I'm not quite sure, but that's what it is. And it actually won second prize in the parade. A large silver loving cup was awarded. And then we also have a quote here from our state historian from our chapter activities of 1930 to 1931. And it said, Deborah Sampson Chapter has always stood high among the chapters of the state in their work accomplished. And that is a legacy that we try to continue through today. The 1930s, ignore that picture is from the 1940s. It was the only picture of the Enterprise building I could find. 1938, we had a lot of reporting on our chapter in the Enterprise, and even before that, there was a young reporter, Miss Maud Conway, who made it her mission to get the DAR and get the Deborah Sampson Chapter into the enterprise any chance she could. And we actually had the honor of receiving the first award from the state for having the longest and best printed reports of meetings in a local newspaper. But one of those articles, which I find funny, is the one over here on the right from 1931. This is chapter member Mary Handrahand stood up for what she believed in while watching a local performance. So what happened, Mrs. Handrahand was a prominent attorney and member of the Brockton Democratic City Committee. She interrupted the entertainment of the Clara Snow Tent, daughter of Union veterans, and caused the cancellation of the remainder of their program for the evening. She felt that the pantomime sketch, Mrs. Murphy's Clothesline, was degrading to the Irish race. She got into a verbal tilt with several members of the Daughters of the Union tent, and the controversy put an end to the entertainment and program for the evening. So, Deborah Sampson Chapter, making trouble since 1931. 1940s, we definitely continued celebrating anniversaries. The 50th anniversary of our chapter was celebrated during the 40s, and this picture here, the woman in the middle, is actually wearing a dress that was owned by Deborah Sampson. It was the property of Mrs. Warren Weeks, who was a past regent of our chapter and a direct descendant of Deborah Sampson. The dress is actually now on display at the Museum of the American Revolution in Philadelphia. And one of our surviving 2 charter members was actually on hand for this 50th anniversary celebration to talk about the founding of the chapter. A budget from 1940. Thought this was interesting to find in our archives. We had about $380 on hand to start the month. And that, if you factor inflation and all of that, is about $6,700 today. So the chapter was doing really well, like money-wise. And some of our expenses, $40 for refreshments at meetings. That would equal about $700 today. $5 donations to a couple of charities. That's about $90 today. $36 for things like janitors and speakers. That's about $600 in today's money. So they were spending a lot of money back then for these meetings. But members, we took in money through dues, but members have always been generous. They've always been willing to donate and step up when their fellow members need help. And there's a note along the bottom there, and that note actually says, from a treasurer, I have paid for 3 full memberships besides my own out of my pocket, and annual dues and quota for 1 more besides my own. I have given free all funeral work and $1.50 for ballots. So through the years and still to today, our members are willing to step up and help when it's needed. 1941, the war effort is really starting. This was a defense program in Hanson that one of our members, Mrs. Ernest Doan, served as a regional coordinator for. And it was an 8-week course and included trainings on motor transport, air raid warnings, military drills to get women ready for what they might have to do to help out the war. And in 1941, our chapter voted to purchase its first war bond. They were going to purchase a $100 war bond. By our meeting in 1942, so just a year later, between the chapter and individual members, $5,000 in war bonds had been purchased. And we also voted to adopt a ward at Camp Edwards Hospital for Christmas to provide gifts and candy and cigarettes, cookies, all sorts of things for patients there. And Camp Edwards Hospital, in addition to serving wounded coming back from Europe and the Pacific, they also became famous for their convalescent trains that would travel across the country and for its WAAC training program for New England nurses. More than 2,500 nurses trained at Camp Edwards before going overseas between 1942 to 1944. So jumping in wherever we were needed. I'm not going to read all of this to you guys, but we did do a lot during the war. We made buddy kits and bags at meetings, gave donations to the Community War Fund, donations of money and of blood and plasma to the Blood Plasma Fund to support that effort. We ordered gingerbread mix from the Dromedary Gingerbread Company to sell to raise money to help with this. We knitted items. The DAR actually had a war service desk at the Hotel Vendome in Boston, and you could go in there and get yarn to help knit for the servicemen. And then we supported the occupational therapy unit at Marine Hospital Ellis Island. And they were looking for money and leather so that the men could work with their hands to get function back. And they were concentrating on the war experience of the Merchant Marine and Coast Guard. And I found it interesting that they actually called out the Merchant Marine, because people don't think of them as part of the military. They kind of forget about the parts that they do play. So it was nice to see them not being forgotten. 1945, every year our chapter would host a guest day. And on guest day, we would invite the other chapters from the area to come and enjoy one of our meetings, celebrate with us. In 1945, on guest day, we had a mother of a soldier join us. And she talked about what it was like for the men returning home from the war. And she talked about what we now know as PTSD, but they didn't really have a name for back then. And she stated that the men fighting for this country and enduring the hardships of war want to feel that the people at home know how serious it is, and that we at home are giving everything we can in the same way they were. She spoke of soldiers meeting men from all over the world and becoming friends as they fight together, and being unable to understand the racial prejudices in this country and the strikes, the complaints about rationing. She urged everyone present to have a share in community planning to ensure jobs and a chance to take up their life again for each serviceman. So she really encouraged these women to work to welcome home these soldiers and do what they needed to feel supported. 1949, we had an accident at a chapter meeting. Our treasurer was turning off the lights and fell and broke her arm in the middle of the meeting. Didn't cancel the meeting. We kept going with the presentation. She was supposed to serve refreshments. Other ladies jumped in and did it for her. And then in 1949, the Brockton Women's Club asked us for help. They were opposing the dog track that was supposed to be built in Brockton. We said, sure, we'll help you oppose that. And as we all know, there's no dog track in Brockton. The 50s. What I found most interesting about the 50s is we had a member in 1958, Miss Margaret Keefe, who at a meeting, our meetings were traditionally weekday afternoons. She asked, can we move these meetings, at least 3 a year, to the evening so women can attend? Because you see that shift of women not just being in the home, but being out in the workforce and not having their afternoons free. And she pushed for it, and we did move those 3 meetings to the evening, and now we meet on a Saturday morning, so even more women are able to attend. March 31st, 1952, we're having another one of our annual guest days. We're expecting people from Taunton, from Marshfield, from Whitman. The Whitman delegation, the biggest delegation that's supposed to come, couldn't make it because of a bus strike. And I saw that and I'm like, that's interesting. Let me see what I can find. So according to the New York Times, on March 10th, 1952, about 1,600 drivers and mechanics of the Eastern Massachusetts Street Railway Company went on strike shortly after midnight, leaving 350,000 bus riders to seek other means of transportation. The strike lasted 126 days. So it was a historical fact about this area I had never heard before. And then in 1952, our members took a trip down to Plymouth, Mass. To see the Pilgrim sites. They made a stop at the Pilgrim Mother Fountain. And the reason why this is interesting is just this past November, our current regent, Patrice, who could not join us today, led an effort for the National Society Daughters of the American Revolution to restore the Pilgrim Mother Fountain to its former glory, get the fountain working again, and clean the statue. And this past November, we were able to rededicate the statue to the society and to the people of Plymouth. So if anybody's taking a ride down there and you're looking at Plymouth Rock, check out the statue. She's beautiful right now.
Okay, in 1955, we placed this plaque on Deborah Sampson's gravesite, which is in Rockridge Cemetery in Sharon.
The 60s, not a lot of chapter records from the 60s. They weren't the best record keepers. Definitely what we did find said sickness was their worst enemy, so they did not have as many meetings or events as usual. 1964, we're never one to let an anniversary pass, so we had our 67th anniversary. What's interesting here is our regent gave a talk on her European trip. Fine, everybody talks about their vacation. But she was there because she was a delegate to the International Convention of Pharmacists held in Vienna. And again, here's a woman in 1964 who's a pharmacist who was accomplished enough to be sent to Vienna as a delegate for her profession. So definitely women who were breaking the mold and excelling on the curve. A budget from 1969, opening balance was about $180, so we weren't doing as good in the 60s as we were in the 40s. We ended through fundraising with $209, which would be the equivalent about $1,500 today.
Another anniversary, our 75th, we had guests from 12 chapters that attended with a total attendance of 44. It was noted that the cake was a masterpiece of culinary art.
The 70s, we found a list of items that we had in our artifacts the chapter had in their possession in the 70s. It included a lot of wood. We really liked wood. There was wood from Deborah Sampson's house, wood from a tree, wood from the Governor John Hancock house. There's a lot of wood. We still have a lot of wood. There was also a button book that belonged to Mrs. Tom Thumb, a cannonball, and a knife and fork that belonged to Deborah Sampson. Somehow that knife and fork, though, has gotten lost over the years. And the button book and other artifacts relating to Tom Thumb and his wife were actually donated to the Tom Thumb Museum in Middleborough. Members wanted to make sure that that history was preserved, so they did that. The 80s, we continued our work in the community with a special emphasis on Constitution Week. Which is observed every year. We'll talk about that more in a second. And this picture, actually, we dedicated that flag to the Pearl Street Methodist Church in Brockton, which was the oldest church in Brockton. And the lady here furthest on the left, Ann Clark, is actually still a member of our chapter and will be celebrating her 60-something anniversary with us this year. So we have a lot of longstanding members. So Constitution Weeks, September 17th to the 23rd. This is celebrated every year across the country. We joined in the so 1987 was the bicentennial celebration for the Constitution, and we actually had announcements running on local television proclaiming it Constitution Week. And every year, members ring bells on September 17th to honor the signing of the Constitution. And we also ask for local government officials to make proclamations proclaiming it Constitution Week in their areas. 1988, we went to Quincy, toured the Adams houses. And what I found interesting is Daughters of the American Revolution actually owned and operated the Adams houses at one point. And they needed extensive renovation, and the society was not willing to take that financial responsibility on. They gave them to the city of Quincy. City of Quincy didn't want that responsibility. They gave them to the Park Service, who did take on that responsibility and still operates them today.
This statue of Deborah Sampson you may have seen outside the Sharon Public Library. When it was unveiled, there was much made about the beauty of Deborah Sampson because she didn't actually look like that. She was rather homely, to be honest.
They tried.
They tried.
1990s, our 100th anniversary celebration. And it was also in 1999 we were able to gift a Bullingford watch with an American-made case to the DAR Museum in Washington, D.C., and that watch is actually still at the museum. Our chapter was the recipient of a lot of awards during the 90s. We got an award for the largest increase in membership of any chapter in Massachusetts, and then other awards for flag presentations honoring veterans and things like that. 97, we celebrated our 100th anniversary. It was marked by much fanfare. It was at the Brockton Historical Society. The mayor of Brockton, Jack Units at the time, actually attended and gave a speech. And then we had the fourth great-granddaughter of Deborah Sampson Janet Bowes Day on hand to present during that meeting.
In 1999, there was a bicentennial of George Washington's death, and there were a lot of events that happened during that year. We participated in one at the East Bridgewater Town Hall, and it was followed by a trip to Central Cemetery. The flag that was placed in honor of George Washington had been flown over Mount Vernon. And also in 1999, commemorating Veterans Day, the chapter planted a holly tree on land that was purchased by the GAR for veterans of the Civil War.
2000 to 2009.
A little history on Constitution Week, which Jill had talked about. The National Society petitioned Congress back in 1955 to set aside September 17th to 23rd annually to commemorate the signing of the Constitution, which was September 17th, 1787. It was adopted and signed into law by President Eisenhower in 1956. And so every year the chapter celebrates that. In 2000, we received the Northeast Division First Place Award. Now, the Northeast Division includes all the chapters of New England and New York. And we got the First Place Award for Most Outstanding Constitution Week display in 1999. Following that, in the year 2000, the committee chair was able to obtain 4 proclamations, 35 hours of radio TV time, 16 displays, 1 church participated in Bells Across America, and 64 children from 4 schools read the Constitution. So it's important to us to perpetuate the U.S. Constitution in educating the public about it. This marker here, Jenny Ripley was a regent of ours, a beloved regent of ours, and in the 30s she was our regent. She had purchased a grave marker from the DAR to be placed on her grave when she passed. Well, for some reason that didn't happen, and it was in her home and found in the year 2002 and returned to the chapter. So over 60 years after her passing, a ceremony was held to place the marker on her grave.
Yeah, she was a regent that did a lot for us, and actually my pin on the bottom here belonged to her. So it's one of our historical chapter archive pieces. So it's cool to have a piece of one of our former regents. 2003, our members gathered at the GAR Hall in Rockland. They were going to go to the 1745 house, which was located on Goddard Ave. And this house was built by Samuel Green. He was not in the Revolution, but he lost a son and a son-in-law during the Revolution. The chapter had dedicated a plaque in honor of Dr. David Jones at this house, and that Dr. Jones studied under Dr. Joseph Warren and was by his side when Dr. Warren was killed in the Battle of Bunker Hill. And the Jones house had already previously been torn down, so they placed the plaque on the Green house because it was the next best thing. In 2010, the town of Rockland decided to tear down the 1745 house. So chapter members did attend that final celebration at the home and posed for a picture with the plaque that they had originally dedicated in 1912. And those are 4 of our members. And some of you may recognize the second lady from the right in the white. That is Dot Taylor, a very long time Abington resident and educator.
And member of the HSOA here.
Yes. And she is one of our past regents. So this picture was actually another grave that we marked. This is in the Scotland Cemetery in Bridgewater. A daughter who was in Texas actually asked us to help out with marking her Patriot's grave since she could not be here. So we did that for her. And then 2006 to 2007 was a difficult time for our chapter. There was actually talk of disbanding the chapter, that members were not involved or dedicated enough. They couldn't give enough time. Ladies stepped up. We found a quote in our archives where one of our members, Glenna, who was actually 102 and still a member of our chapter now. She stepped up to be regent and saved our chapter. She's the reason why we're still here today.
We like to have fun.
One of my
Since almost the first year of our chapter, we've celebrated the Christmas holiday with a party during our meeting. And for many years, Miss Maud Conway dressed up as Santa for the event. This is a tradition that we've continued to this day. And this is from our party in 2019.
It's one of my favorite pictures. I think it really shows how we like to have fun and how we are all friends too.
And different generations.
In different generations, yeah. In 2015, we honored Vietnam veterans in Brockton at the War Memorial. We invited any Vietnam veteran that wanted to join us and gave them a certificate of appreciation for their service. And then in 2016, we joined the Braintree Bicentennial Time Capsule dedication, and one of our members actually dressed up as Abigail Adams for that event.
The DAR is committed to service, and in 2020, at the height of the pandemic, our chapter was able to go on with service in the community. We conducted a clothing drive for the Vietnam Veterans of America. We had a chapter meeting where we installed 2 new members, and we did visits to the Veterans Garden in West Bridgewater, and we had a cleanup day at the sheep pasture in Easton.
And that brings us to 2022, celebrating our 125th anniversary. Started in January. We had a tea party that was meant to recreate the organizing meeting of 1897. And we encouraged members to dress up in period clothing. And those are 3 of our members in their period-inspired clothing.
So I recognize the one in the middle.
Yeah, she looks vaguely familiar. And that's everything about, that's 125 years of history.
And I'm reminded I need to turn my microphone back on. Well, thank you.
You're welcome.
A nice chronology with a sense of humor thrown in.
We try.
That's half the fun.
You gotta have fun, you know? With so much going on, you gotta have fun.
So, Steve Baker, were you around for that bus strike back in the 50s? No. Okay, that was before your time. Okay, I wasn't sure. So, some of our members have different fingers in different pies around here. So, some of the things you were saying, I wonder if so-and-so knows about that. So, that's cool. Any questions from the audience? Yes, ma'am.
A couple quick ones. How many members do you currently have in this chapter, and how many of them are ancestors of Deborah Sampson?
So currently we have no direct descendants of Deborah Sampson, and we have about 43 members.
I think it's around 47.
47. We've gotten a few more few new members.
We gain
so,
and
yeah.
we lose.
Yeah.
All
So-
of us.
We're usually between 40 and 50 members any given year.
Yes, ma'am.
Do you know if Deborah Sampson is a descendant of Henry Sampson, who came over the Mayflower?
She is related to somebody from the Mayflower. I don't remember if it was Henry Sampson. I know William Bradford is one of her ancestors.
See, someone knew the answer. A William Bradford descendant.
Yeah, right. No, I just...
Okay.
That's it, thank you.
I have a question. So the granddaughter at Mount Vernon, I missed the name. I know the main name you said was Clapp.
It's
Aurelia
Aurelia.
McDonald.
What's the last
Her
name?
maiden name is Clapp.
Yes.
It's Aurelia McDonald.
Thank you.
Yes.
You mentioned that there is sons of the American Revolution. Are they still intact and just as active as your daughters of the American Revolution?
They're still intact. They have a different focus. So the DAR is primarily a service organization. So yes, we have to prove lineage to a patriot, but then we are out in the community doing community service work, supporting different organizations. The Sons have more of a focus on, I would say, preserving history. So you're going to see them more at grave marker dedications in their honor guard, in full-on military uniforms with their muskets. So different focus, but they're still out there doing a lot of work in that realm.
And they have to have the the relation to?
They do. Their application process is not quite as strict and as intense. So if you, let's say your father was in the Sons of the American Revolution and you wanted to join the DAR, you can't use his Sons of the American Revolution application as proof because the DAR says that's not good enough. We need more than that. So similar requirements, but different.
Any other questions? How about upcoming events? What's on the horizon for you guys?
Well, next month, we are doing a rededication ceremony of the Deborah Sampson plaque at her gravesite.
Where is that?
It's in Sharon at Rockridge Cemetery. Yep, we'll be doing that. In June, we are hoping to have a booth at the Founders Weekend here in
Please.
Abington.
I have something to do with that, please.
Yep. The end of the end of June, we're going to participate in the Braintree 4th of July parade. In the end of the summer and in September, we're going to be cleaning the Clapp sisters' graves, a couple of them. And in October, we're going to be placing a plaque. We like to do plaques. We're going to be placing a plaque for a real daughter, Lydia French, at the Union Cemetery in Bridgewater, and her father, Asa White. They're buried in the same plot in Union Cemetery. So we're going to be cleaning their graves in next month, hopefully, and then placing plaques and having a ceremony to dedicate those in October.
Now, Deborah was originally from Plimpton,
Right.
but most of her memorial stuff is in, was it Canton? Sharon, because she married and
Benjamin
passed
Gannon.
away
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
So is there recognition of her in Plimpton? If you mentioned it, I missed it. I'm sorry.
There's there's a plaque on a boulder on Route
Okay.
58 across from the Plimpton Congregational
Oh, okay,
Church.
I know where that is.
Yep.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
If you don't have a permanent home, where do you keep your artifacts?
Currently, it's in the home of the Regent.
Oh.
I was going to say it's in a shoebox. No.
No, it's in the home of our region, and we actually do have a file cabinet here. So when it's not in the home of our region, it's
It's in the
actually kept
shoebox
here.
in the back.
Yeah, it's in a shoebox here. It's a cannonball, so it takes up a little more room than a shoebox.
We actually have a cannon.
We do.
Yeah, we cannonball,
We
yeah.
have the most amazing things in this building, first of all.
It's a small cannonball, but it's a cannonball.
It's all right. It's a cannonball.
So don't mess with us. We have a cannonball.
I think somewhere in our collection we have a splinter of wood from John Brown's gallows or I think. How would you know?
Well, we have, like I said, we have a lot of wood in our chapter archives, and it's like, are you sure that's the right piece of wood?
No.
No, we don't know. It's
That's
from a
the
tree.
answer. No. So artifacts are kind of funny like that. Speaking of which, yeah, I'm sorry, Eileen.
I just wanted to mention, one of your slides talked about the pharmacist that went over to Vienna, and her name was Ethel Pierce.
That's a major name
Ethel's
here in
from
town.
Abington,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
she donated basically a replica of a pharmacy that's downstairs in this building.
Yeah, and we've actually looked into, so the DAR has a award that they do in March, and it's Women of American History, and she is one that we have planned to honor with that award. We just have not gotten there yet.
If people are interested, they can go downstairs.
There you go.
Look at Ethel Pierce's stuff.
It's Ethel T. Pierce.
Yes.
She was the head pharmacist at South Shore Hospital and had relatives who were neighbors of mine growing up.
Health and
Yeah, she was on the
Yeah.
Board of Health.
Yeah.
You know, we had professionals in the board. We had doctors and nurses and pharmacists in the Board of Health back in those days. It was really quite a prestigious rank.
Yeah.
So,
Yes.
but yeah, she's well represented here in this
Yes,
building.
she
That's
is.
a nice thing too.
And I'm like,
pharmacy is fantastic downstairs.
yeah,
yeah, and I'm still just impressed that, a woman was that accomplished
yeah.
in that time period.
Oh, and she was.
She was.
And if you go downstairs, we have dishes from that Order of the Cincinnati.
I don't know where those are, so you might have to guide them.
Okay, there was a case down there, but they were given to officers in the Revolutionary War.
Oh, okay, yes.
So we have, I think they're Gridley Thaxters.
Eileen Walls is on staff here, and she's a
Yeah.
retired teacher. and-
Jill was one of my students.
I just recognized you as you said that, and I was like,
When they said Jill Higgins, I said, oh, that's funny, I had a Jill Higgins. Oh,
It was her.
Yes, I graduated from Abington High School in 2000, for those of you. So, yes.
Connections. We enjoy the connections by all means.
I found a few of them in this room.
Yes,
How many
ma'am.
chapters are there in Massachusetts?
I'm sorry?
How many chapters in Mass?
40.
Are there 40?
40 chapters
There
in
are 40
Massachusetts?
chapters in Massachusetts. We just got back up to the number 40 this past year. They had a new chapter form up on the North Shore.
And Deborah Sampson's the first one.
We were not the first, but we are one of the oldest in the state. There were a couple that formed right away when the organization started. And then there's a big group of us that are right around that 125th year. I know the other two are Paul Revere chapter in Boston and Boston Tea Party, also in Boston. We're celebrating their 125th.
Nice. Excellent. One more question.
When the DAR began, who started it and what was its purpose when you began?
So speaking back to the founding of the entire organization or local?
No.
The entire organization.
Where did that?
What was the inspiration for and who started it?
Well, funny thing is, in 1889, the Sons of the American Revolution was formed. And women wanted to be a part of it, but they were excluded. And one of our founding members said, weren't there any women, weren't there any mothers in the revolution? And so the following year, there were 18 women that gathered together and created the National Society, Daughters of the American Revolution. And they had 11 members that became members that day when they gathered together. And the dues, I don't remember how much the dues were, but I think their total budget that they started with was $33.
That was a lot of money then.
Yeah, and the mission of the DAR is historic preservation, patriotism, and education, and that's what their goal was when they first formed.
What I also found interesting about the formation is they were looking for headquarters. And they were looking in Washington, D.C., and there was a patch of swampland that these women purchased to build their headquarters. And all of the men said, what are these crazy women doing purchasing swampland in Washington, D.C.? Their building's gonna, fall into the swamp. It is now 1776 D Street, one of the most prominent streets in Washington, D.C. The headquarters is still there, and it hosts Memorial Constitution Hall, which is the largest performing arts venue in Washington, D.C., operated by women.
In all fairness, Washington, D.C. is built on a swamp.
It is. But they thought these women were crazy.
I'm not going after symbolism there, but it really is built on a swamp, quite literally. So that's not terribly surprising. But, anyway, okay, this has been a delightful presentation. I thank you both for making it. I'm going to invite them to join us in the back room for a brief collation. We have refreshments back there, coffee, tea, and today we have lots of cake. Some of you are familiar with the ritual. It's one I started some years ago. For my birthdays at this point in my life, I have one cake per day per decade. Now I can't eat them all by myself. And those are even followed by one mug cake for every subsequent year. So this year I'll be having cake for 14 days. So it's kind of fun. So I get to share my cakes. So there's some Boston cream pie back there and some confetti angel food cake and all sorts of sour cream coffee cake is one. Anyway, but whatever, they're all back there. So please stay and help yourself to that. Where did the clipboards end up? One over here, Don has one, and I just want to make sure they make it to the back somewhere. Okay, they're around.
There's an exhibition in the other room.
Yes, okay. Kathy just reminded me we have some exhibition materials in the other room. We have on the entry table some brochures, I think, as well. There's some brochures there also for Abington Celebrates for their upcoming Flag Day Founders Day weekend. It's the first of the brochures. We'll be updating them as we go along. but feel free to grab one of those as well. We'll be meeting here again at 2:30 on the first Sunday of May, and we'll be talking about the encampments, the Civil War encampments, and particularly the one that will be coming up at Island Grove Park as part of that weekend. And they'll be doing a mock skirmish on Saturday and Sunday of that weekend at 1 o'clock. I think they're once again doing the mock amputation. A little gory for my taste, but it seems to be awfully well attended. So I won't go there, except I think we're doing it. Or I think they're doing it. So something else to look forward to. That's a big weekend. We start with a kickoff cookout at United Church of Christ. This year, for the first time, there'll be a concert at the high school, junior high school, put on by the town band, the Abington Town Choir. I think the Sweet Adelines are in it. But that's something we've not done before. There is a 5K road race on Saturday just before the fireworks on Saturday. There's a lot. Oh, and a classic car show on Sunday afternoon at Lowe's at 1 o'clock. Those are just some that rose to the top of my brain as I pulled together that brochure. But feel free to grab a brochure and participate. It's after our next meeting, so I'll have a chance to plug it again and tell you more about it. And the last thing I want to leave you, with, almost last, is that the Dyer and the Historical Society here are a repository for all things Abington, Rockland, and Whitman, particularly. Those are our target areas. Old Abington. The three towns were one town until the mid-1870s, when Rockland and Whitman broke away as separate towns. Whitman originally is South Abington. I always tell people that if there's one of anything that reflects the history of those three towns, it belongs here, where people can see it. And to that point, Don Ken came in this week with a sign to add to the collection of a farm that was acquired recently. Don, do you want to just say a quick word about it?
Yes, up across...
The camera's over there.
on Beach Street, across from what we used to call the dump. The McCarthy family since the 1950s have operated the farm. The matriarch of that farm just recently died. Because they had a farm, they were qualified for a tax rate for agricultural, and under the provisions of that tax rate, the town had first offer. They also had a P&S by a developer. We on the Open Space Committee approached the town to apply for a grant, which we did. We got a $400,000 grant. We got money from CPA, and we got money from taxpayers, essentially. We bought the farm under the.
You actually used the phrase "you bought the farm." You did. I heard it come out of your mouth.
I didn't get a reaction. So we bought the farm.
Well, it got a reaction from me.
We have lots of requirements for the $400,000 from the state. Building a parking lot, building trails, put the bounds in, etc., etc. We're hurrying to finish those requirements. If our deadline is June 1st. Questions?
Okay.
By the way, before the farms, it was all the deeds say brickyard. There were deposits of clay there. We don't know a lot about the brickyard. The deeds go on and on about the brickyard, just mentioning it's the brickyard. Right. There are pits that now are vernal pools that they harvest the clay from, but we don't know the name of the company. We don't know where the bricks went or anything like that.
But we'll figure it out.
Some people, some folks have done some research. It's very good research, except that we don't know the name.
Okay. And the last exercise before I release you to go eat, would the members here, or at least the most recent members or past dues-paying members, please raise your hands and identify yourself, and look around and see who didn't raise their hands and say hi. So thank you all for being here. It's exciting to be back in person. Thank you for our local cable for coming and putting us on cable and YouTube. Paul Watson is our videographer today, and he also came in during COVID and taped several conversations on various topics. We'll get a list out, and I'm really remiss in not doing that. We stayed active in doing one-on-one type interviews on various topics. And the head of the Dyer trustees, Marie Layler, and I did one on the Spanish flu, basically everything old is new again. And that one's up on YouTube and available for viewing. So anyway, thank you all again, and go eat.